All right, welcome everyone. My name is Laura Echavez, and I am a program coordinator with the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. Tonight, we're going to introduce you to the GGRO, our work, as well as give you an overview of our volunteer programs. And the goal is really to help you determine if you would like to apply for the 2024 field season. This is going to be recorded, as you saw, but please make sure to grab a pen, a paper, whatever way you'd like to take notes, and a calendar just to keep tabs on any important dates. And we're going to jump right into it. So next slide. We're going to start with what exactly is the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory. We are actually a program under the umbrella of a nonprofit organization called the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy. And since the early 1980s, we've worked in cooperation with the National Park Service to track the annual fall migration of raptors, which we're going to touch on a little bit more in a few minutes. Next slide. Okay. At the moment, the GGRO is composed of 3 full-time staff. Maybe we'll get our director, Alan Fish, to give a little wave, and Teresa Ely, our senior biologist and banding manager. And as I already mentioned, I am a program coordinator, and currently I support both the banding and the Hawkwatch programs. You'll get to hear from both Alan and Teresa as we delve into each program in a little bit. So next slide. As I mentioned before, we are a part of the larger Parks Conservancy, and some of our staff split their time between GGRO and the other conservancy programs within the Conservation and Community Science Department, which we are a part of. And that includes other programs like 1TAM and the Bee Lab. You might have heard of those. So Mel Hackett is our operations manager. She's also in this call. And Carmen De Leon is one of our program coordinators as well. Next slide. In addition to our staff, we also host seasonal interns or fellows that provide additional staff support during the migration season. Last but not least, we also have our volunteer community scientists. So between the Hawkwatch and the banding programs, we have over 150 volunteers right now. We're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about what is the GGRO. So the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory was formed in the early 1980s to track the migration moving through the Golden Gate. And this is an annual flight of tens of thousands of hawks, eagles, falcons, and vultures, birds that are collectively called raptors. And this happens over the Marin headlands. So every fall, our GGRO staff, interns, and our nearly 200 volunteers engage in volunteer community science, collecting important data on this fall migration of raptors, the largest raptor migration in the Pacific states. And the GGRO collects data on 19 species of raptors as they fly through the Marin headlands during their migration to the wintering grounds. So GGRO is the first partnership program of the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy and National Park Service, and has been a model for community science for decades now. So what is this journey that the raptors and also other species embark on? Raptors generally migrate for food sources and warmer climates, but we still don't have a full understanding of how they know where to go or why they chose certain places as wintering grounds. Raptors will follow certain routes known as flyways to get from their breeding grounds to their wintering grounds. And you can think of these as intercontinental highways. There are at least 4 major flyways in North America. And on this map here, you can see with red dots, where raptors find concentrating in significant numbers in areas with large mountain ranges or along shorelines. Next slide. And these congregations can happen for various reasons. So raptors may congregate due to negative barriers like large bodies of water, as the bay is, where they may be reluctant to cross, Or they also congregate due to attractive locations like mountain ridges that offer updrafts, which birds will use to gain lift to assist them in a more energy efficient journey, which we also have in the Marin Headlands. These places where the large number of raptors concentrate make it easier for organizations like us, GGRO, to collect data on species that are sometimes harder to study due to their natural history. And the GGRO is perfectly placed in the Pacific Flyway along a coastline, creating a bottleneck where the raptors will take a short trip over water on their southward migration. Next slide. So because of their wide-ranging migratory behaviors, the raptors in the Marin Headlands provide data for much broader populations and have helped improve our understanding of species trends, population genetics, diseases, life histories, climate change shifts, and causes of mortality. For example, the use of DDT dramatically decreased raptor population in the 60s. Species like the bald eagles, peregrine falcons, osprey, and Swainson's hawk, their populations intensely declined due to DDT. And when DDT was banned, there was a rebound in these populations. So this decline and rebound could be seen in annual fall migration hawkwatch data. On the other hand, banding has also provided us with information on longevity, site fidelity, movement ecology, disease, poisons, and has been used to study climate change impacts. Another example is the American kestrel, which has been observed to be getting smaller. Their wing length and their body weight has decreased over time in some parts of North America, and this seems to be a result of changing climate. Next slide. Which brings us to GGRO's mission, which is to inspire the conservation of California's raptors through research, community science, community outreach, and education. And how do we do this? We do this through community science-based programs like the Hawkwatch program, banding, telemetry, and outreach. Next slide. Okay. So during the autumn months, teams of volunteer hawk counters identify and tally the 19 raptor species that pass through Hawk Hill. Hawks are counted systematically using a consistent method developed by us at GGRO, which is called the quadrant system, and the data from different years can be compared. The count results help us look for trends and patterns in hawk populations over periods of time. Simultaneously, specially trained GGRO volunteers trap and band raptors to collect measurements and important health data. Band recoveries and encounters then help us answer questions about raptor movement and ranges, and often provide insight into causes of raptor injuries and mortality. As of 2023, more than 1,750 bands have been encountered, some as far away as Mexico and British Columbia. We've also had other projects here at GGRO. Our volunteers began radio tracking hawks in the 1980s, and as technologies have improved, GGRO has also started exploring the use of satellite transmitters to collect data on hawk locations and movement. Though these various tracking methods can be labor-intensive and costly, they provide important data on daily movement patterns, habitat use, and even human impacts on migration. Last but not least, community engagement is really an important part of our work. GGRO volunteers engage with more than 10,000 members of the public and school children annually on Hawk Hill, and this increases awareness and inspires the next generation of raptor stewards. As of 2019, more than 1,000 students from SF Title I schools have visited Hawk Hill through Migratory Story, which is a partnership program between GGRO, the Chrissy Field Center, and the National Park Service. I'm going to share a little bit about our expectations for volunteers now. So the volunteer commitment during the field season is 1 day every other week from mid-August until early December. And the field season is 16 weeks long, so that equals to 8 field days total. All training classes that we provide are mandatory. For banding, there are also some mandatory group work days, and some of these are going to be virtual so that folks don't always have to drive into the headlands, and they're recorded for watching afterwards. Communication, that is essential. So communicating if you're unable to make it to your assigned field day. With 2 absences or consistently being late can result in you getting dropped from the program. So we also understand that people get sick and life happens, but the volunteer success depends on your presence and your assigned field days. As we move through this presentation, you're going to see the amount of work that it takes to be successful in these programs. We put a lot of time into training our volunteers to be experts in this field, which it honestly cannot happen in just one season. And so new volunteers are expected to complete a 2-year apprenticeship. And then we get to your 3rd year when hopefully you will help us train the next set of volunteers. Our programs are very special and unique because we really rely on the experienced volunteer community scientists to help train the next cohort of volunteers. So here's what our field schedule looks like. Don't be intimidated by this. The season starts on Monday, August 12th this year and runs for 16 weeks, and we're on a 2-week cycle. So for example, if you're on a Friday 1 team, your first day would be August 16th, and your second time out would be 2 weeks later on August 30th, and so on. If you're on a Tuesday 2 team, that means that your first day would be on August 20th, and your second would be September 3rd, 2 weeks later, and again, so on. However, between fog and other unforeseen conflicts, you may be reduced to as few as 6 or 7 good days of raptor action, sometimes even less. If you already know that you'd have to be absent for more than 1 field day between August and December, this might not be a good year for you to work with us. And we know that people have some pre-planned fall trips. This doesn't mean that if you have a planned trip that you can't volunteer with us. You will just need to take into consideration those pre-planned obligations when choosing the day that you decide or are able to volunteer with us. So just keep in mind that if you miss a field day, it could be a month before your next day, whether it's weather or any other circumstance. So that's just a brief overview for now. I'm going to hand it over to Alan, who's going to talk more about the Hawkwatch program.
Thank you, Lada. That was wonderful and a lot of information. So, and great to have so many people. We've been doing volunteer recruitment introductions since 1984. And this is one of the biggest single groups ever to be at a meeting live or Zoom. So thank you for being here. Thanks for caring about raptor conservation and biology enough to be part of this this intro tonight. So I'm going to tell you about the Hawkwatch program and the details of it. And wonderfully, I'm scripted here with exactly what I need to say. The Hawkwatch is really a measuring stick on the level of activity of the raptor migration. There's no perfect way to measure a migration, but between Hawkwatch and banding and the tracking systems that we use, we do a pretty good job. And the Hawkwatch captures the raptors per hour, visual raptors per hour seen over Hawk Hill. So on the daily Hawkwatch program, you'll meet at 9:15 at Hawk Hill up on Conzelman Road, right above the Golden Gate for a morning meeting and an ID review for that day. If we rarely don't meet. If it's raining a lot, we might call off the day. or we might call off the morning or delay the morning, but even in thick fog, we will still meet and get together and wait for the fog to leave and do various dances to get it done. Next. So the actual count is 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So it's a 5-hour count. We'll be done. We'll finish off at 3 o'clock and then leave the hill by 3:30 with a little startup education program and a closure. While you're on Hawk Hill, you're working with a group of people to monitor your quadrant of the sky. So you're going to be responsible for a quadrant as an apprentice. You'll have a coach working with you and helping you learn how to see raptors and how to identify them. You're kind of at the you're under the tutelage of the team. And a lot of experience already, years and years experience that'll be there to help and support you learning how to do this. Next. Being attentive to the sky, it's funny, over the years, I've heard many people say, oh, I can stand in one place and look at the sky. I can do that. It's really easy. It's not really easy. It's actually quite, it's an intense activity. You really have to stay alert. We do allow you to take breaks when you need to, and otherwise, we really depend on you to be looking at your quadrant of the sky and communicating really well with your team and listening. So just the point that it sounds a little like a passive activity, it's not. And anybody who's been up on the hill with us to observe what's going on, I'm sure knows that too. Yeah. Next question, or next. So as I mentioned before, we'll have different mentors working with you. We won't just throw you into a quadrant and say, what, you missed all those birds? We will take care of you. We want you to get good at this. Our goal is to give you, as Laura said, a 2-year apprenticeship and a chance to show us in your that in a 3rd year that we'll be able to advance you into working in a quadrant and teaching the next generation of people coming in. So in your first season, if you get a few good days, we'll try and get you to be working in a quadrant by yourself so that you can really keep this going. And you'll always be within a dozen feet of 4 or 5 people that'll be ready to descend on you if you shout Darkmoor ferruginous. So don't worry, we'll all be there together. Next. Binoculars. Binoculars are definitely the needed tool for Hawkwatch. And if you have your own pair, absolutely bring them. If you have a pair that you love and that you've used a lot, that's the best. They're like toothbrushes. People are very particular about what they like. At a later meeting, I'll talk in more detail about a magnification and size of binoculars because some work really well for hawk watching and some do not. We do have a number of binoculars that we can loan out for the day from GGRO that we can bring up and loan to you, so you can try a different pair than you have, or just use one of ours. But of course, a lot of your training and a lot of your time learning how to be a good raptor identifier is going to happen as much in your life off the hill as it is on the hill with us. So hopefully you'll be able to acquire a pair of binoculars at some point. We'll talk more about binoculars in a later training so that you have a chance to ask more questions and think about what you might want. So in front of you is the schedule for the Hawkwatch program. And the idea is this is the pre-schedule, the training schedule before we get to the migration start date, which at the bottom of the page you can see is Monday, August 12th. Same for Hawkwatch, same for banding. That's the first day of the 2024 migration. So we'll get started on that day. If you back up to the top of the page, you'll see that there's a variety of things that we will need you to be involved with. There'll be an optional site visit to Hawk Hill on either March 23rd or April 13th. That will be before we've completed the selection process. We're going to do interview and selection. We'll talk about that in a few minutes for both banding and hawk watching. But it'll if you haven't been to Hawk Hill and you want to kind of get a sense of it with the staff, we'll be up there to meet those days and give a program on what it's like to be there. If you cast your eyes down, you'll see there's an orientation class for GGRO for all hawk watchers and bander apprentices coming in. And then there's a series of 3 Wednesday evenings in July that will be what we call B-FIT, Basic Flight Identification Training, 1, 2, and 3. That's to pull in all 19 species, and we'll need everybody to go through those either live with us or as a Zoom recording, but it's much more fun live. And as Lada just noted in the chat, please feel free to take a screenshot while we have this up. If you think you're interested in hawk watching, and there will be a similar banding program schedule of trainings that Teresa will show you in just a minute. What are we looking for Hawkwatch volunteers? Again, this is this is not a completely passive activity, although it sometimes sounds that way. We need a better word than hawk watching, like, I don't know, hawk finessing or something. But you do need to walk up and down the 300-foot elevation gain to the top of Hawk Hill from Conselman Road. You will be standing on the hill and scanning hawks for a 5-hour day. And let me be a little more specific about that. The way we do it is your day leader will assign you to be in one quadrant for a half an hour at a time. And then you'll be moved to another quadrant for a half an hour and another quadrant for a half an hour. So in a 5-hour day, I'm not going to do the math, but you basically get moved every half hour through a variety of quadrants. Potentially, as you get better, you'll also be a recorder for us. So we'll have a few different roles for you to be in. And the real point of that is you don't just get to wander freely around the hill. We really need you to be in your quadrant doing your quadrant spotting in order to get as many birds as we can in that area. So yeah, I want you to be comfortable at least with you're going to be more or less standing in one spot for 30 minutes at a time, shifting weight, moving side to side, doing squats, whatever you need to do to stay alert. But it really is about being alert in one place, scanning for hawks for 30 minutes in one direction. A lot of the hawk watch is about yelling, yelling and listening. And it's a little tricky on windy days, but it's really important that you be able to yell hawks that are coming up and let people know what they are, or let people know that there's a raptor. I see a hawk is a really popular thing to say. And then people can help you identify it, or we'll work together to identify it. We're all, again, standing within 10 to 20 feet of each other. So the idea is we're working together as a team to identify to do the identifications. As you get better at this, you'll be able to identify stuff on your own. But the goal for us is to get as many people's eyes on the same bird so that we can confirm identification. So listening and yelling are both very important, especially with a little bit of wind, with a little bit of noise around you. Being able to selectively listen is really key. This is probably, it seems maybe kind of facetious, but it ain't. Being enthusiastic, being your good, charming, anything could happen. I'm so happy to be out here in the headlands today on cold, foggy days is really important. If it's super foggy, we do not go right up to the top of the hill and count hawks. We'll actually go to a lower elevation site, do an identification training, and then potentially, if it's still foggy, we might do a little bird walk around the Rodeo Lagoon or Gerbode Valley, looking for birds, keeping a species list before it clears up on Hawk Hill, and we'll go up to the top of the hill. We have a general rule: if it's not fog free on Hawk Hill by 1 o'clock, we will let the team go home. So you do capture some of your day, but we're pretty bold about staying on Hawk Hill as long as we possibly can, because even partially foggy days are good raptor days for raptor watching. So I'm going to hand it off to GGRO senior biologist Teresa Ely to talk about the banding program.
Okay, give me 1 second here to kind of minimize this. Okay, so hi, my name is Teresa Ely, and I'm the senior biologist and the banding program manager at GGRO. I've been in this position since 2016. And so with these next couple multiple slides. I'm going to go over probably a lot of information in a short amount of time. So just get ready and please save questions for the end. So the banding program, let's see, next slide. Okay, so for banding, and we need to be somewhat camouflaged when we are out in the field trapping for this to occur. And so banders will spend their day in a small plywood box, and you'll hear me refer to that as the banding station or banding blind. And so this station looks over the headlands and we're watching for incoming raptor traffic. After we trap the hawk, we're gonna, using a series of nets, we're gonna then fit the hawk with the appropriate band size. It is also measured, and then we try to release these birds in about 20 minutes because we wanna limit our handling time to reduce stress and to get them back out on their migration. Our attention to these birds and the nets that we trap them in is paramount. Some days can be cold and foggy and we're not seeing many birds. Other days can be really hot hot. And the birds might be really high and we may not be, may not be coming down and we may not be trapping them in our nets. And so even on these kind of slow days, we always need to pay attention to everything that's going on. So this means even if it's slow, no podcasts or music or any other distractions using a phone are permitted in the banding blinds. We are there as a small team in the blind and we will talk to each other and we will enjoy each other's company and the birds. This is also a longer day and more strenuous day than a hawkwatch field day. Our days can vary depending on raptor flow and weather. And during peak migration, we could be out for like a full field day from when we meet to when we end for about 10 to 11 hours, really depending on what we've got. So I will get into the routine like day in a moment, but I do want to cover some other commitments that we have. So, and you'll hear me say this probably many times, but the banding program does involve a higher level of commitment than the Hawkwatch program. And that is because we have additional training days. And as you can see in these pictures, we have our volunteers handling and taking measurements of raptors. And so this requires specific training to do these things. And we want to make sure that the data is also being collected accurately. So it requires practice and it requires attendance, right? So to be present. We also have a lot of work to do to prepare for the field season. And this requires what you'll hear me call a site setup or a site takedown day. Those are our work days. And those work days are required as a volunteer agreement to be there. And I'll show the calendar in a little bit so you know when these days are. It was really important to us to also get these dates figured out now so that way you can look ahead. I know it's I think March. And we're talking about August. We're talking, and for the band and for training for Hawkwatch and banding, we're talking about July, right? So anyway, I'll show you that calendar in a little bit. But our routine banding day usually starts at 7:45 every morning, and it is important to be on time. I can't stress this enough. Being late means that you're missing certain things like our safety meetings. And so it's really important to figure out what the traffic's going to be like on a morning that you would be coming into the headlands. So we have our meeting. We also have some morning chores that we need to take care of before we can head out. And we usually typically head out around 9. That's kind of your last time to use an official bathroom. And we'll be out at our banding station and set up for our activities by 10. We usually stay out until 3:30 or 4 o'clock, but again, this may go later depending on the flow of migration, the flow of birds. If there's a lot of birds coming through, we can stay out and continue to band until a certain time, but we might be out a little bit longer during that peak. And then once we close down, that may take 30 minutes or so, and we head back to the office to take care of other chores. And we try to, in certain parts of the season, we may wrap up by 5 or 6, but it could be as late as 6:30 on some of those really big days. So we come back, and like I said, we do some chores, we proof data, and we really want to complete this as a team. And so we will work with our small teams to make sure everything is done and it's not falling on any one person to wrap up the day. I was talking about a higher level of commitment. And with that, we do ask our volunteer banders to commit to 16 hours of off-season work outside the regular banding season. And that is in addition to that site setup and site takedown day. The off-season runs from around now to mid-July. And so we're just looking for 16 hours between however many months that is, 6 months. And those tasks will have like work days, and we'll have other like special tasks or projects that we need help with. And you sign up for them to try to get to that 16 hours. And those tasks include things like net mending, painting sometimes, or placing things, what we call jute out in the field to reduce erosion of our field sites, because we are kind of like running around out there. So sprinting, I should say, not running. And with that, we are asking, our volunteers must be able to be comfortable doing short hikes up steep and uneven terrain, be able to do quick sprints to get out to our nets, have good reflexes, not be claustrophobic, because we will be sitting in a small blind, and we have had volunteers realize that they are claustrophobic after being accepted into the program and spending a day in the blind. We also need our volunteers to have good situational awareness, because we have a lot of things to pay attention to. So in addition to that, we have necessary skills and abilities just because of the work that we're doing. So we need adequate vision to spot and ID the birds of prey. We need people to be able to read small fonts. For either of these, you may wear corrective lenses. Small fonts are in our smaller band sizes that we use. So you have to be able to read those band numbers that we place on the bird. Adequate hearing to be able to respond to situations where you may not have a visibility of a person speaking or the animals that you're working with, may include hearing devices. People will need to frequently lift, carry, or position objects weighing up to 30 pounds. And this really comes in for like our work days. We do set up these banding blinds, and we do take them down. And so there's some of that, and moving equipment can be, obviously you can have another set of hands, and we encourage that to help lift and carry things, but just to let you know. And the field work will include also not only like these quick sprints and uneven terrain, but also sitting on a stool for possibly 8 hours a day, or squatting or kneeling, because we're out in the field station. And the ability to walk up and down a rocky fire road about a ½ mile in length. It has a steep grade and carrying about 20 pounds. So one of our sites is in this kind of type of location, and you'd have to carry your own backpack, your lunch for the day, your water for the day, and the equipment that is going to go out to the blind that day, the banding station that day. So because the banding program does have this higher level of commitment, and we can't go over everything tonight. I won't be able to answer all the questions you have. But that's why we're going to have a mandatory volunteer recruitment part 2. And here are 3 dates. So after tonight, when you fill out your application, those that are interested in banding will pick one of these in-person recruitment dates for the part 2 session. And then this part 2 doesn't mean that you're officially accepted in the program. We have 80 or so people here tonight. We have 100 or so people registered for this info session, and the banding program may only be able to take on 14 to 20 new apprentices. So we're going to go through this process together, and just know that not everybody will get a spot that may be interested in getting a spot. We will also have interviews after this last in-person option 3 date of April 6th. That's the next selection part of the process. The next phase in selection is you may be offered an interview, you may not be, but yeah. And then after the interviews, the qualified applicants will be invited for a Bander Apprentice field assessment. This is to get you familiar with the space that you'll be working in, potentially, and the field location, and some other things that we just need to go over that before that first day out. And that would be 1 day required, and you'd work with us and and our other current volunteers who are very experienced in this. Sometime between June and July, we'll have a calendar where like you'd be able to pick a day to come out. And then once selected into the banding program, we'll ask you to attend these same mandatory trainings that Alan presented, and as well as the orientation. And so these, the GGRO orientation is an orientation of what we do and all the things GGRO. And so that's all Hawkwatch and banding apprentices. And then we have these 3 flight ID trainings as well that banders will attend, because we also need to be able to ID the birds that we're banding. If we can't ID the bird that we're banding, we actually can't band it, turns out. So it's really important that people start studying the raptors. And this is a great way to do that. So these, while all these are mandatory, they are recorded. So if you cannot attend that Wednesday, those Wednesdays, you can watch them later, and we will ask you to like check off that you've watched it and completed that training, because you'll have to do it. And then the other required trainings, and these are really important dates. These are all, except for one, in-person training. These are mandatory bander trainings, and there are unfortunately no makeups. So first we have a mandatory bander apprentice training, and that's where all the new apprentices would come out on July 27th, which is a Saturday. And it is an all-day event where we will go over all the different process, how to band, how to do all these different things. And excuse me, when I say process, that means taking measurements. So like taking wing chord or taking the bill length. So we go over all these different skill sets with skin specimens, educational specimens to practice on. And so again, Saturday the 27th, July 27th is mandatory. And then I referred to that site setup day, right? So our site setup for the banding program, where we're going to be putting in our nets and bringing up our stools and all those things, is either on August 3rd or Sunday, August 4th. So one of these 2 days is required, because we want you to get familiar with the site. We want you to start getting familiar with the equipment. And the best way to do that is to jump on in and start working alongside the other volunteers who will help train you. If you are interested in coming to both, you might be able to come to both, but only one is required. And then we will have a virtual all banders, and that's where all of the banders. So right now we have about 70 volunteer banders, and everybody attends this to make sure that we're all up to date on all the things. That includes our permits, that includes maybe topics on avian flu, because we are going to be working with birds, and different protocols that may need to be updated. So we get all that logistical thing out of the way virtually. Again, this one would be recorded so you can watch it later, but we have a second part to it, which is the All Banders Training Part 2, which is on Saturday, August 10th. And that is an all-day thing in the Headlands. Again, this is to review skills, banding skills. Maybe we are starting a new research project and we need to go over the new sampling techniques, etc. So this is also a required training. And again, these don't have makeups. And so if you have, something like a vacation planned for July 27th that's out of the country that you can't get out of, or whatever you might be doing, this is not going to be the season for you to join the banding program, unfortunately. So, and as Alan also stated, August 12th, Monday, August 12th is the first day of the season. And so now I'm going to hand it back to Laura whenever she is ready.
All righty, thank you. We're getting pretty close to wrapping up, so I just want to recap what we're looking for in a volunteer. The first thing is a well-developed sense of curiosity and humility about learning a lot of new information. Next slide. We also are looking for eagerness to do the job that is needed and a sense of responsibility to support the GGRO, the park, and the team. We're looking for a commitment to the conservation of these wild birds. If you've lived in the Bay Area for a while, you know the weather. Both Teresa and Alan have alluded to this a lot. And so maintaining a positive attitude on those foggy days especially is a must. And we do have folks from all walks of life in our volunteer community. So being able to work with many types of people and personalities is very important. Most importantly, however, communication between team members on the Hill and at the banding sites is essential, and that requires being an excellent listener. So a little bit into the next steps. In the next day or so, you're going to receive an application to fill online. So again, make sure that you used your full name here on the Zoom if you feel comfortable, so that we can check you off on our end and send you the application, which will be due on by 5 p.m. on Friday, March 15th. There are a lot of folks present tonight, and we can only accept a number of apprentices that our volunteer leaders can support. So unfortunately, not everyone will be invited to continue in this recruitment process. And if you are invited to the next steps, the next phase in recruitment, there will be a mandatory in-person event for those interested in banding and a site visit for Hawkwatch that is not mandatory, but we do highly encourage you to attend, especially if you haven't been out into the headlands. Also, please note that because there is so much training in each of the programs, you would only be accepted into one of the programs at this time. So now I'm going to outline what that selection process will look like. So once we've reviewed applications and you've done the in-person event, we will conduct interviews, and mostly those will be over the phone. You'll submit a professional reference with your application, which we'll check, and we'll also confirm our current team's needs and availability. You should expect to hear from us with a final decision by mid-June. Again, we have a limited number of mentors, and that will impact the number of folks that we're able to take into each of the programs. So just doing a time check here, making sure that we're not going over time, and it looks like we're at a good time to start with questions. We've got some questions in the chat. Please feel free to write more into the chat if you have more. And I'm gonna start reading off some of the questions that we had from the beginning. But we can also monitor the chat here. So, all right. This question, it actually could be for either one, but maybe Teresa, how early would the schedule and or team assignments be known?
That's a great question. First, I have to find out what we can support. And so currently I am receiving my bander returning forms, and I haven't gotten all of those yet. And what that is people who are returning are going to let me know if they have schedule changes, or maybe they need to step away from the program, retire, etc. And the banding program, which I'll get into this at the second session, but we have this whole system of volunteer leadership, and I need X amount of this leadership on each day. So I kind of have to navigate that, and then I hope to have stuff figured out by May, so that way I can figure out how many spots we may have and what we can do. But on the application, like if you can volunteer on a Monday or a Tuesday, choose some of those days, because the Saturdays and Sundays are the fullest days. And it's really, I may have one spot and I may have 10 people who want that spot. And so if you have any other availability on weekdays, you may have a higher chance of like making it into the program. Not a guarantee, obviously, because I need to make sure that our leadership is there to support our teams. Does that answer the question as best as I can?
Yeah, thank you. See. I would imagine, Alan,
Could
you
I-
have a similar.
Yeah, I would
area.
just add, I think last year we had the schedule for Hawkwatch ready by the first week in June, like June 7th or so. So I think we could probably get pretty close to that this year. The idea being that we want to give you 6 to 8 weeks to plan your schedule, but you will also be opting in for certain days that you know you're available, and we'll try and get you set up on a team, of course, that uses that schedule that you've given us.
For banding, we want to have it early enough so that way you can make sure that you're available for all these mandatory training dates. So it is a high priority to kind of get that, but it's always different each year when that actually happens.
All right. One of the next questions, if we apply to the banding program and don't get in, is it possible to still try for Hawkwatch?
Why don't I take that since it's about Hawkwatch? I think it all depends on how many people tonight and over the next few weeks actually send in applications. So as Teresa said before, we're limited by the number of mentors that we have. It's hard to tell in a population this big, and also people who are going to listen to the recording. We could end up near 100 applicants if everyone sent in an application. So we're going to have to wait and see. And if you do an interview for banding and want to have an option on hawk watching, I think the timing will work that we could still interview you for hawk watching if we have space. So we'll just have to take that as it goes. Teresa, do you want to comment on that at all?
I think you covered it. I think just on the application, there is an option to indicate if you're interested in both, and then a chance to rank them. So if you are thinking about this and you're like, I really want to be a part of this program, and if I don't make it into banding, or if I didn't make it into Hawkwatch and you want to do both, like indicate both and then rank them.
A follow-up to that, a very related question is if somebody wants to do both Hawkwatch and banding, I'm not sure if maybe only one per year, but which one would you recommend that person to volunteer for first if they could only choose one?
I'm going to nominate Teresa to answer that.
Great. Can you repeat the question?
Sorry.
Essentially,
I was listening.
if somebody wants to do both, but can only do one, which one would you recommend the person to do first?
Honestly, and I don't know if Alan is gonna agree with this, but I would actually say Hawkwatch. It's so important to be able to identify the hawks, and having that skill first, I think can also like pace out how you have to learn all of this stuff, right? So if you don't have a lot of raptor watching experience, which is fine, that's a great place to start. And I actually think that these two programs complement each other in identification skills because when you're banding, you're very focused on specific things. And when you're hawk watching, there's some of these pressures that are off. And there's still pressure to like ID the birds and ID them correctly, but it's a different situation, and not having this like extra thing to navigate, I think, yeah, it's helpful. So, but you can do both. I'm not like, you can also not really know a lot about raptors and start with the banding program too, because you're doing all the same ID classes and everything. So.
All right, next question. Maybe Alan can tackle first, and Teresa, you can chime in after, but will there be any help arranging carpools from SF for folks who don't have vehicles?
Great question, and bravo for being a person without a vehicle. Uh, and yeah, so where we are in that is we have so many volunteers that we cannot get directly involved with carpools. And a lot of times our scheduling is so intricate and requires so many moving parts that Teresa and I are working on, that being able to even schedule you for a day with people who might live in your region is tricky for us to do. So the way we've handled this in the past is to say, getting yourself to the Marin Headlands is really absolutely on you. And I know that one of the reliefs in the last decade has been having Uber, Lyft, and car share opportunities from San Francisco. Unfortunately, buses do not help. There's a Sunday bus that comes into Fort Cronkite and up to Hawk Hill. Actually, not to Hawk Hill, but to Conzelman Road, right below Hawk Hill. But only on Sundays, and the scheduling is not terribly useful for us. So I really apologize that we don't have a better system. In a perfect world, we'd have a Hawk Hill van that came over from the Presidio or from a hub in San Francisco, at least, to bring people up toward there, but we don't have that yet.
Great. Did you want to add something, T? Or
No, I think it's a really great question. It's something that we are like very aware of and that we would like to be able to provide, but the best that like what's happened, at least on the banding side, is that I end up being able to schedule somebody on a team, and then they make friends throughout that team and then are able to carpool with people on that team. But again, like as Alan mentioned, we don't have that capacity to do that organization of scheduling carpools. Hopefully maybe in the coming years something will change, but it's a great question and something we would like to change. So that's all I'll add.
thank you. Next question. T, you could tackle this one first. What are you looking for in the professional reference?
Oh, someone that can speak to your abilities. Like we mentioned, being on time is really important. Somebody that knows if you're punctual. We'd prefer it not to be like, a sibling or a family relative. But maybe somebody, if you volunteer at another organization, or if you're involved with any other outside curricular type things, those can be references. So just someone to kind of speak to some of your abilities to also communicate and all that. And I'll hand it to Alan to add anything else.
That was well done. I wouldn't add anything else. We're not digging deep on your work career or anything. We want to know that you know how to get places, that you'll be humble and work hard to learn Raptor methodologies that we're proposing to you, that you work well with. That I really liked the part that Lada mentioned before about working well with a wide variety of personalities. We are personality rich. Raptor people are strong personalities, and you're all part of that, as near as I can tell. So we just want to know that you are someone who understands as much as we can tell what you're getting into. Thanks for bearing with us on the reference check part.
I want to know before I ask any more or give any of the other questions, I do want to be conscious of the time, and it is 7:33, so our hour is up. I know we started a little late, so if you want to stick around for the next couple of questions that are left, please feel free to do so, but also feel free to leave if you have to. The next question is for Teresa. Is the workday schedule for the banding program the same as Hawkwatch, meaning one workday every other 2 weeks, not counting the setup or takedown days?
So the 1 week, 1 day every other week. Yes, but I think there is an option on the application that if you can do every week, like you can choose that. We don't primarily do that because we do want to like have a good group, a decent sized group, right? So if we limit, we may only end up with like 14 apprentices, and if we do the every other week schedule, then we can open it up a few more slots. But again, like coming out on those assigned every other days is very, very important. So yeah, right now, but like I think there's an option to choose that. And I kind of look at what the system as a whole, like the whole core cohort could do, because we want to make sure that the training is evenly paced for our apprentices. So yeah.
Great. Next question. Are there any restrictions on how far away a volunteer can live from the headlands? Maybe
Uh,
Alan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just gonna jump in anyway, obnoxious person that I am. We've had some amazing dedicated people. I remember somebody from Grass Valley who did it for a season. We've had people from Monterey. In fact, one of our veterans from Monterey was on the call tonight. A lot of times people make an effort to, sadly, I used to have people stay at the hostel in the Marin Headlands overnight. Unfortunately, that hostel is closed now, which is tragic, but um, yeah, it's really on you. We have a group of people from Davis who come down some days and do a banding day, and we have an amazing geographic range. I guess I'm admitting we have a huge ecological footprint, carbon footprint, but um, it really is up to you what you feel like you can pull off. Of course, Bay Area traffic is one of our biggest enemies, and that can be a really hard part of negotiating your day. But as long as you can get yourself there, that's good for us, I think. Teresa, do you have anything to add?
I would, I mean, I don't think there's like a limit on miles or hours because, like, I don't think that's fair to do. However, um, knowing how far the commute is, and this is why we want to do also the second round of recruitment session, is so that you drive out to the headlands. You get to know that drive a little bit, and you know how long that's going to take. The banding program also requires at least a 2-year commitment, if not 3. And really, I do want, like, it's more of a 3-year commitment. And so I've had volunteers who live 3 hours away, Fort Bragg, or I guess that might be more, and other places that are like 3 hours away that realize that drive ends up being something more than they thought they could handle. So, like, and coming out, because we do have these work days, and there's a site setup day. There's the requirement for every other week for banding, but then in the off season, we may have a work day that's only 2 hours. Now, we want you to come to that work day, and you have a 3-hour drive there, a 2-hour event in the headlands, and then a 3-hour drive back. It's something to just really consider, like, can you do that? And people have gotten hotels or when we had the hostel, stayed at the hostel. But it is, I've seen people with longer commutes drop off quicker. And it's because the commute gets to be too much and the commitment for banding is so great. So, I mean, you can try it, but just remember, definitely a 2-year commitment is required for the banding program. If not, I want to say, I want to say 3 years, because what happens is we train this group of apprentices and we're investing a lot of time, and we want you to also like help us then train the next set of apprentices that'll be coming in 2026. And that's really how this program has been able to train so many volunteers and go out and collect these data every day during the field season. And it really brings this community together. So anyway, I'll end there, but it's just something to really consider when, yeah, you're considering these programs. And okay, one more thing. But yeah, for the banding, we start at 7:45 most mornings, but we may start as early as 7:30. We don't really start at 7:15 anymore, but you know, between 7:15 and 7:30, you need to be there during peak. And again, lateness is not like great being late, because we have so many safety things that we need to go over. You have to be punctual, you have to be on time. And then these days could go in, you know, I've left the headlands. I mean, I'm probably leaving a little bit later than the volunteers just because I'm like in charge of things. But you know, maybe volunteers have left by like 7 p.m. And so like that's kind of like the extreme, like a 12-hour day. So it's a lot.
Thanks, T.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're getting close to wrapping up here. I want to thank Mel for answering some of the questions that we have on the chat, some general questions. I'll just reiterate a couple just so that everybody, if you haven't gotten a chance to look at the chat, if you're curious about the fellowship, which is our new internship coming up, and the Hawkwatch application, and would like to apply for the fellowship, but would also love to volunteer if you end up not qualifying, could you apply to both? And yes, the answer is please totally apply for both. Somebody asked if you need to know how to handle birds, or are you trained on the safety of handling, etc. And Mel said, yes, we provide all training, no experience needed. And let's see. All right, I think most of the questions were answered here. We can always share some of these maybe later, some of these answers too, but you'll also get to learn some of these answers as we move through the next phases of the recruitment program. So again, thank you all for being here today. I don't know if T or Alan or Mel, you wanted to say anything else, but yeah, feel free.
Just
I just
thanks
want to say,
everybody for,
oh.
sorry, Teresa, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Oh gosh. I just was gonna say thank you to everybody for joining tonight. I see some familiar faces, and that's really great. You know who I'm talking about. And I'll pass it to Alan.
Yeah, again, it's just really enheartening to see the level of interest, and I'm sorry we're not a bigger staff that we can take absolutely everybody. So bear with us in this process. Feel free to communicate with GGRO at parksconservancy.org on any questions that you specifically have, so that we can answer them over the next few weeks and months. And thanks for being here. Thanks for spending time with us. And Laura, thank you for emceeing us tonight. You did a fabulous job.
Thank you.